"You're fired." 2 words. That's all it took for Grayson Hale to destroy Althea Brooks' life. She stood in his office, uniform still damp from cleaning his master's suite, hands trembling as she stared at the billionaire who'd just accused her of theft. Rain battered the mansion windows behind him. Thunder rolled like a warning no one would heed. "Mr. Hale, please, I didn't take anything. My wife's bracelet is missing. You were the only one in that room." His voice was ice. "I'm being generous by not calling the police." Althea's vision blurred with tears. 32 years old. Mother of 2. 8 months on this job. And now, everything was ending because of something she didn't do. "I have children. I need this job. Please, just check again. Security will escort you out." Now. But this isn't where the story ends. It's where it begins. Because 3 years from this moment, Grayson would find himself in a hospital basement cafeteria, staring through a window at an impossible sight. His sick son laughing, being fed soup by the woman he'd condemned. And the truth he'd buried would surface at exactly the wrong time. The bracelet had been worth $12,000. Diamond and sapphire. The last anniversary gift Grayson gave his wife before she died. "Where is it?" His words came out cold, controlled. Althea's hands shook. "Mr. Hale, I swear I didn't." Security reviewed the footage. "You entered my bedroom at 2:47 this afternoon. The bracelet was there this morning. Now it's gone." He pulled out his phone. "So explain what you did with it." "I cleaned the room like I do every Tuesday. I didn't touch any jewelry. I wouldn't. Everyone says that. But I'm telling you the truth." Her voice broke. "Check my bag. Check my car. You won't find it because I didn't take it." Grayson leaned forward. "Do you know what that bracelet meant to me? It was the last piece of my wife I have left. I didn't take it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I have a daughter with asthma. Medical bills I can barely afford. I would never risk this job." But he didn't believe her. Couldn't. Because Grayson Hale had built his empire on certainty, on trusting data over instinct. And the data said she was the only one in that room. Grief had turned him into something harder. His wife's death 2 years earlier had left a hole he tried to fill with control, with order. And when the bracelet disappeared, all that control shattered. He needed someone to blame. Althea Brooks was convenient. "I'm transferring 2 weeks' pay. Consider it generous." "No, please," she stepped forward. "My daughter's medication costs $300 a month. My son starts school next year. You should have thought about that before you stole from me." "I didn't." The scream ripped out of her. "How can you look at me and not see that I'm telling the truth?" "Marcus." Grayson nodded to the security guard. "Escort her out. I want her gone within the hour." The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe." "That's an order." Marcus moved forward. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." Althea looked at Grayson one last time. Not with anger, but with disappointment. Like she'd expected better. Like she believed there was still a good man buried inside all that wealth. She was wrong. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "One day you'll realize it. But by then, it'll be too late." She walked toward the door with whatever dignity she had left. That's when they heard it. A small voice from the hallway, choked with tears. "Dad." Grayson's heart stopped. Leo stood at the stairs in his pajamas, eyes red and swollen. 6 years old and already learning that trust can hurt. "What's happening? Where is she going?" "Ms. Brooks is leaving," Grayson said flatly. "Go back to bed." "Why?" "That's not your concern." Leo's face twisted. "You're sending her away." "Not a question. An accusation. You send everyone away. Everyone who's nice to me, you make them leave." "That's enough. I hate you." The boy's voice shattered. "I hate you, and I want Mom back." Leo ran to Althea, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Please don't go. I'll be good. I promise." She knelt down, cupping his face. "This isn't your fault, baby. You are good. You're the best thing I've seen in a long time." Then stay. I can't. She kissed his forehead. But remember what I told you about being sad? It means you love something real. Don't let anyone teach you not to feel. Marcus cleared his throat. Ma'am. She stood, looked at Grayson one final time. I hope you find what you're looking for, Mr. Hale. Because this. She gestured at everything. This isn't it. Then she walked out into the storm. Leo pressed his hands against the window, watching her car disappear. Grayson stood frozen, listening to his son's broken sobs, feeling something crack in his chest. Outside, Althea sat in her 15-year-old sedan and screamed until her voice gave out. For 8 months, she'd had purpose, had loved that boy like her own, and it had been ripped away by a man who chose pride over truth. Inside, Grayson poured whiskey, told himself he'd done the right thing. But somewhere deep in the part of himself he refused to examine, doubt whispered. What if she was telling the truth? He silenced it with another drink. Locked those questions away. At least, not yet. If you believe power should never crush the innocent, hit subscribe. Prideful Hearts won't. Also download your free ebook titled, How to Heal from Betrayal Without Becoming Bitter, by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Grayson Hale built his empire on precision. Hale Tech didn't just dominate the market, it suffocated competitors. At 34, he was worth $3 billion. Forbes loved him. Wall Street feared him. And everyone who worked for him knew one rule: perfection or nothing. But money can't buy control over the things that actually matter. His wife, Elena, died 2 years before that rainy October night. Brain aneurysm. No warning. One moment she was laughing at breakfast. 8 hours later, she was gone. The doctors said it was painless. Instant. Like flipping a switch. Grayson didn't believe them. Because for him, her death was anything but instant. It stretched out. Endless. Every morning, he woke up reaching for her. Every night, the silence screamed. So he did what powerful men do when grief becomes unbearable. He buried it. Channeled everything into work. Into numbers. Into things he could measure and control. His mansion became a mausoleum, spotless, silent, suffocating. 30 rooms and not a single photograph of Elena displayed. He'd boxed them all away. Out of sight. Out of mind. Or so he told himself. Only Leo refused to disappear into the silence. 6 years old. Dark curls like his mother. Questions that cut like glass. Dad, did Mom have a favorite color? Dad, why don't we talk about her? Dad, do you think she can see me? Grayson never knew how to answer. So mostly he didn't. He'd ruffle Leo's hair. Mumble something about being late for a meeting. Let the nanny handle it. Let anyone handle it. Because sitting with his son's grief meant confronting his own, and Grayson Hale had spent 2 years building walls specifically to avoid that. His staff walked on eggshells. One misplaced fork, one wrinkled shirt, 1 minute of lateness. Grounds for immediate termination. He told himself it was about standards. About excellence. But really, it was about control. The illusion that if he could keep everything around him perfect, maybe the chaos inside would quiet down. It never did. The truth Grayson refused to see? He wasn't protecting his son. He was suffocating him. Leo ate dinner alone most nights. Went to bed without stories. Grew up in a palace that felt like a prison. Raised by a father who was there in body, but absent in every way that mattered. And when that bracelet went missing, when he had the chance to show mercy, to practice the compassion Elena had tried so hard to teach him, he chose pride instead. Chose certainty over doubt. Chose the easy narrative that the help was guilty, because questioning his own judgment would have meant admitting he wasn't in control after all. Althea Brooks paid the price. But in 3 years, so would he. Because the universe has a funny way of forcing us to face what we've buried. She arrived on a Tuesday morning with nothing but a worn duffel bag and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Grayson barely looked up from his tablet when Mrs. Chun, the head of household, introduced her. "Mr. Hale, this is Althea Brooks. She'll be handling cleaning and meal prep." "Fine. Make sure she understands the rules." He didn't even glance her way. Just another face in the revolving door of staff who never lasted more than a few months under his impossible standards. But Althea was different. Not in the ways Grayson noticed at first, but in the ways that mattered. She didn't flinch at his cold demeanor. Didn't gossip with the other staff. Didn't complain when he changed dinner plans at the last second or left messes in his office out of spite, testing her like he tested everyone. She just worked, quietly, carefully, with a steadiness that felt almost defiant in a house built on chaos and grief. And then there was Leo. The boy had barely spoken in weeks. His last nanny quit after he threw a tantrum, so violent she'd locked herself in the bathroom. The child psychologist said it was normal, trauma response, abandonment fears, all the clinical terms that meant Grayson was failing as a father, but nobody would say it to his face. Althea met Leo on her third day. He was sitting on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to his chest, silent tears streaming down his face. The morning nanny had called in sick. Grayson was already gone for a breakfast meeting. And Leo had just broken. She didn't ask questions, didn't hover or panic or call for help. She just sat down beside him, cross-legged on the cold marble, and started humming. Something soft, something old, a melody that wrapped around the kitchen like a blanket. Leo's crying slowed, then stopped. He looked at her, really looked, for the first time. "My mom used to sing," he whispered. Althea nodded. "Mine too. Music remembers when we forget." After that, something shifted. Leo started appearing in the kitchen while she cooked, asking questions, telling stories about school, showing her drawings he'd hidden under his bed because his father never had time to look. She listened to every word, laughed at his jokes, taught him how to fold dumplings on Saturday mornings, let him lick the spoon when she made brownies, even though the kitchen rules explicitly forbid it. For the first time since Elena died, Leo laughed. Not the polite chuckle he gave tutors or the forced smile for photographers. Real laughter. The kind that shook his whole body and left him breathless. Grayson heard it one evening from his office. The sound stopped him mid-email. He stood, walked to the doorway, and watched through the crack as Althea and Leo played some made-up game involving wooden spoons and a timer. His son looked happy. It should have brought relief, gratitude. But instead, Grayson felt something twist in his chest. Something bitter and sharp. Because he hadn't made his son laugh in 2 years. But this stranger, this woman he'd barely acknowledged, had done it in 3 weeks. He told himself it was intrusive, that she was overstepping, that staff should maintain professional boundaries. But the truth? It scared him. The ease with which she filled spaces he'd left empty. The way Leo looked at her like she mattered. Like she was already becoming someone he couldn't lose. And Grayson Hale didn't know how to handle anything he couldn't control. Comment: kindness is strength. If you believe gentle people hold the real power. The mansion began to change. Small things at first. Things most people wouldn't even notice. Fresh flowers appeared on the hallway table. Not the stiff, expensive arrangements from the florist Grayson paid a fortune to, but wildflowers. Daisies and lavender bunched in a mason jar. Simple, warm, alive. Leo's drawing started showing up on the refrigerator, held by magnets shaped like animals. A house with a crooked door. A stick figure family. A sun that took up half the page. The kitchen smelled different too. Not like the bland, organic, precisely portioned meals the previous chef prepared, but like cinnamon rolls on Sunday morning. Like garlic and herbs on weeknights. Like someone actually cared whether the food tasted like home or just looked good on a plate. Althea folded throw blankets over the living room couch. Opened curtains Grayson had kept closed for months. Left books on the coffee table, children's books, the kind with worn spines and dog-eared pages that looked like they'd been read 100 times. The other staff noticed. Mrs. Chun smiled more. The gardener started whistling while he worked. Even the security guard at the gate nodded approvingly when he saw Leo running through the yard instead of sitting alone in his room. But it was the laughter that changed everything. It started small. A giggle during breakfast. A snort during homework. Then full, unrestrained belly laughs that echoed through hallways that had been silent for so long they'd forgotten what joy sounded like. Leo came alive. Started asking if he could help with dinner. Requested specific songs. Told Althea about his dreams, the scary ones and the good ones. Talked about his mother without crying, because Althea had taught him that remembering didn't have to hurt. "She sounds beautiful," Althea said one afternoon while they kneaded dough together. "She was," Leo replied, flour dusting his nose. "Dad doesn't talk about her anymore. Sometimes grown-ups forget it's okay to be sad." "Do you get sad?" Althea paused, hand stilling. "Every day. But I've learned sad doesn't mean broken. It just means you love something real." Leo thought about that, then hugged her waist, leaving flowery handprints on her apron. From his office, Grayson watched through the security monitor. He told himself he only checked for safety reasons. He watched his son hug this woman like she was family. Watched her smooth his hair with a tenderness that made Grayson's throat tight. He should have felt grateful. Should have thanked her. Should have acknowledged that she'd done in 2 months what therapists and specialists and expensive interventions couldn't do. Brought his son back to life. But instead, he felt something darker. Jealousy, resentment, fear. Because the house was warming up. And Grayson had grown so accustomed to the cold. He'd convinced himself it was safer that way. Warmth meant vulnerability, meant attachments, meant risking loss all over again. So instead of leaning in, he pulled back. Stayed later at the office. Ate dinner alone in his study. Avoided the kitchen when he knew they'd be there. And told himself it was better this way. Professional. Appropriate. Controlled. But deep down in the parts of himself he refused to examine, Grayson Hale knew the truth. He was terrified. Not of Althea, but of what she represented. The possibility that life could feel like living again. The charity gala was everything Grayson Hale despised. Fake smiles. Hollow conversations. Wealthy people patting themselves on the back for writing checks they'd never miss. But appearances mattered. Hale Tekka's reputation depended on it. So he showed up in his $1,000 tux, shook the right hands, and left early with a pounding headache and a deeper contempt for humanity. He got home past midnight, loosened his tie in the elevator, wanted nothing more than silence and whiskey. But when he entered his bedroom, something felt wrong. The air was different, displaced, like someone had been there. His eyes went immediately to the dresser, to the small wooden box where he kept Elena's jewelry. The box his staff had strict instructions never to touch, never to move, never to even look at too long. It was open. His pulse spiked. He crossed the room in 3 strides, hands already shaking as he lifted the lid. The rings were there, the necklace, the earrings she'd worn on their wedding day. But the bracelet, the diamond and sapphire bracelet he'd given her on their last anniversary, the one she'd been wearing in the last photo ever taken of them together, was gone. The room tilted. His breath came short and sharp. That bracelet wasn't just jewelry. It was the last physical piece of her he could hold. The last thing that still carried her scent, faint as it was. And someone had stolen it. Rage ignited, hot and all-consuming. He grabbed his phone, fingers stabbing at the screen. Security. My office. Now. Marcus, head of security, arrived within minutes. Grayson was pacing, jaw clenched so tight it ached. Someone was in my room. My wife's bracelet is missing. Pull the footage. Every camera. Every angle. I want to know who entered this house in the last 24 hours. Marcus nodded, already pulling up the system on his tablet. They watched in silence. Delivery drivers at the front gate, Logged and verified. Gardener in the yard. Never entered the house. Housekeeper Mrs. Chun in the kitchen. Nowhere near the second floor. Then, at 2:47 p.m., a figure appeared in the upstairs hallway, moving toward the master suite. Althea Brooks. Grayson's blood went cold. Stop. Zoom in. There she was, clear as day, entering his bedroom with cleaning supplies. The timestamp showed she stayed for 18 minutes. When she left, she carried the same supplies. Nothing else visible in her hands. But the bracelet was small, easy to hide. Pull up the other exits. Did she leave the property today? Marcus checked. No, sir. She's still here. Logged in at 7 this morning. Hasn't left. Grayson's hands curled into fists. His mind raced through possibilities, searching for alternatives, for explanations that didn't end with the woman his son loved being a thief. But the evidence was there. Cold. Undeniable. She was the only one who'd entered that room. Where is she now? Staff quarters. Her shift ended at 9. Grayson stared at the frozen image on the screen. Althea's face, caught mid-step, expression calm and unsuspecting. He wanted to believe there was a mistake. Wanted to find another answer. But pain has a way of turning into anger. And anger needs a target. Wake her up. Bring her to my office. Sir, it's 1 in the morning. Now, Marcus. The security guard hesitated, then nodded. He knew better than to argue when Grayson used that tone. 15 minutes later, there was a knock. Soft. Uncertain. Grayson didn't turn around. Just stared out the window at the dark grounds below. Come in. The door opened. Althea stood in the doorway, wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, eyes heavy with sleep and confusion. Mr. Hale? Is everything okay? Is Leo? Sit down. Something in his voice made her freeze. Made her look at Marcus, then back at Grayson. She sat slowly, hands folded in her lap, and Grayson finally turned to face her, his expression carved from stone, his eyes empty of everything except accusation. My wife's bracelet is missing. You were in my bedroom today. You're going to tell me where it is. Althea's face went pale. Not the flush of guilt, but the bloodless shock of someone who's just been punched in the chest without warning. Mr. Hale? I would never. Security footage shows you entering my bedroom at 2:47 this afternoon. You were there for 18 minutes. The bracelet was there this morning. Now it's gone. His voice was surgical, precise, each word designed to cut. So unless you're telling me it grew legs and walked away, you're going to explain what you did with it. She shook her head, hands trembling. I cleaned the room like I do every Tuesday. I dusted the dresser, changed the sheets, vacuumed. I didn't touch any jewelry. I swear to you, I didn't take anything. The cameras don't lie. Then check them again. Her voice cracked. Check my bag. Check my room. Search everything. Please. I'm telling you the truth. Grayson leaned forward, palms flat on his desk. Do you know what that bracelet meant to me? It was the last gift I gave my wife before she died. The last piece of her I have left. And you. I didn't take it. Tears spilled down her cheeks now. Mr. Hale, I have children. I would never. Everyone says that. Right before they're caught. Marcus shifted uncomfortably by the door. Even he looked uneasy with how this was unfolding. But Grayson couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Because if he admitted there might be doubt, might be another explanation. Then he'd have to face the possibility that he was about to destroy an innocent woman's life over his own paranoia. And he'd built his entire empire on never being wrong. I'm giving you one chance. Tell me where it is, and I won't press charges. Lie to me, and I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Althea stood, legs shaking. I didn't take it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Grayson straightened, pulled out his phone, started typing. What are you doing? Her voice was barely a whisper. Transferring 2 weeks' pay. Consider it generous given the circumstances. No. No, please. She stepped forward, desperation cracking through. I need this job. My daughter has medical bills, my son. You should have thought about that before you stole from me. I didn't. The scream ripped out of her. Raw, guttural. I didn't take anything. How can you look at me and not see? Marcus. Escort her out. I want her belongings collected and her gone within the hour. Sir, Marcus hesitated. That's an order. The security guard moved forward reluctantly. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I need you to come with me. Althea looked at Grayson one last time. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with something worse. Disappointment. Like she'd expected better from him. Like somewhere, beneath all his wealth and power, she believed there was still a good man buried inside. She was wrong. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. And one day you're going to realize it. But by then, it'll be too late. Marcus touched her elbow gently. She pulled away, straightened her spine, and walked toward the door with whatever dignity she had left. And that's when they heard it. A small voice from the hallway, choked with tears. Dad. Grayson's heart stopped. Leo stood at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, eyes red and swollen. He must have been woken by the raised voices. Must have heard everything. What's happening? Where is she going? Althea's face crumpled. Leo, sweetheart. Ms. Brooks is leaving, Grayson said, voice flat. Go back to bed. Why? What did she do? That's not your concern. Leo's face twisted. He looked at Althea, then at his father, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then understanding dawned. Horrible and complete. You're sending her away. Not a question. An accusation. Leo. You're just like before. The boy's voice shattered. You send everyone away. Everyone who's nice to me, everyone who makes me happy, you make them leave. That's enough. I hate you. Leo screamed. Tears streaming. Fists clenched. I hate you and I want Mom back. The words hit Grayson like bullets, each one finding its mark. Leo ran to Althea, wrapped his arms around her waist. Please don't go. Please. I'll be good. I promise I'll be so good. Althea knelt down, cupping his face. Her own tears falling freely now. This isn't your fault, baby. None of this is your fault. You are good. You're the best thing I've seen in a long time. Then stay. I can't. She kissed his forehead. But you remember what I told you, okay? About being sad. He nodded, hiccuping through sobs. It means you love something real. Don't let anyone teach you not to feel. Marcus cleared his throat. Ma'am. She stood, looked at Grayson one final time. I hope you find what you're looking for, Mr. Hale. I really do. Because this. She gestured at the mansion, at everything. This isn't it. Then she walked out. Down the stairs. Through the foyer. Out the front door. Into the rain that had started again, like the sky itself was mourning. Leo ran to the window, pressing his hands against the glass. Watching her car disappear down the long driveway. And Grayson stood frozen in his office, listening to his son's broken sobs, feeling something crack in his chest that he thought was already too dead to break. Outside, Althea sat in her car, engine running, hands gripping the wheel, and screamed until her voice gave out. Because this wasn't just a job. This wasn't just money. For 2 months, she'd had purpose again, had felt needed, had loved that little boy like he was her own. And Grayson Hale had ripped it all away with the same careless cruelty men like him always do. He'd chosen his pride over her truth, his certainty over her humanity. And somewhere, locked in a drawer 5 months from now, that bracelet would be found, would prove her innocent. But by then, the damage would be irreversible. Hit subscribe if you'd never side with someone who ruins a life without proof. Only the unjust scroll past truth. The flowers died first. Nobody watered them after Althea left. The daisies and lavender wilted in their mason jar, petals browning at the edges, until Mrs. Chin finally threw them away. Then the drawings came down. One by one. Grayson told himself it was because they were cluttering the refrigerator. But really, he couldn't stand looking at them. Couldn't stand the reminder of his son's laughter. The laughter that had disappeared the moment Althea walked out that door. Leo stopped eating. Pushed away, plates untouched. The new cook prepared his favorite meals, or what used to be his favorites. Chicken tenders, mac and cheese, pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He'd stare at them like they were foreign objects, then walk away without a word. He needs to eat, the pediatrician said during the house call Grayson paid a fortune for. This is more than grief. This is protest. But Grayson didn't know how to fight a war against a 9-year-old silence. He tried, in his own broken way. Bought Leo a new bike, a gaming system, front row tickets to see his favorite team. Threw money at the problem like he threw money at everything. Leo accepted it all with the same hollow expression. Never said thank you. Never said anything. The mansion returned to what it had been before Althea. A museum, beautiful and cold and lifeless. The curtains stayed closed. The blankets stayed folded. The kitchen smelled like nothing. Grayson buried himself in work. 18-hour days became 20. He slept in his office more than his bed. Told himself it was because the Singapore deal needed attention. Because the merger couldn't wait. Because Hale Tech was on the verge of something historic. But the truth? He couldn't stand being home. Couldn't stand walking past Leo's room and hearing nothing. Couldn't stand the weight of what he'd done. Because late at night, when the office was empty and the city lights blurred through his window, Grayson would replay that moment. Althea's face when he accused her. Leo's screams when she left. And he'd pour another drink. Tell himself he'd made the right call. That the evidence was clear. That he'd protected what mattered. But protection shouldn't feel like suffocation. 5 months after Althea left, the housekeeper found the bracelet. Wedged behind the dresser, tangled in dust and forgotten wires. She brought it to Grayson's office on a silver tray, eyes downcast. "Sir, I found this during deep cleaning." He stared at it. The diamonds caught the light. Still perfect. Still beautiful. Still his wife's. And still proof that he'd destroyed an innocent woman. The housekeeper waited for a response. An apology. Anything. Grayson picked up the bracelet, locked it in his desk drawer, and told her to leave. He never spoke of it again. Never called Althea. Never tried to make it right. Because admitting he was wrong would mean admitting he was capable of cruelty. Would mean facing the man he'd become. So instead, he let pride build walls around the truth. Buried it deep where guilt couldn't reach. And convinced himself that forgetting was the same as moving on. It wasn't. 3 years later, Grayson Hale owned half the world. Hale Tech had expanded into 12 countries. The stock price tripled. Forbes put him on the cover with the headline, "The Man Who Built Tomorrow." He stood on stages and accepted awards. Shook hands with presidents and tech giants. Gave interviews where he talked about innovation and vision and the future of artificial intelligence. And felt absolutely nothing. Success, he'd learned, was the loneliest drug. You chase it thinking it'll fill the void. But every milestone just reveals how empty you are inside. He dated, if you could call it that. Models and executives and actresses who looked good at galas and never asked difficult questions. Relationships that lasted 3 months maximum before they realized he was unavailable in every way that mattered. "You're not really here," one of them said before leaving. "You're like a hologram. I can see you, but I can't touch you." She was right. But Grayson didn't know how to be anything else anymore. Leo turned 9. Grew quieter with each passing year. They lived in the same house, but existed in different worlds. Breakfast was silent. Dinner was separate. Conversations were limited to logistics, school schedules, doctor appointments, permission slips. "How was your day?" Grayson would ask, trying. Fine, Leo would answer. Always fine. Never more. The boy had learned to survive by becoming invisible, by wanting nothing, by expecting nothing. And Grayson told himself that was normal, that all kids went through phases, that they'd reconnect eventually. Then came that Tuesday morning in October, 3 years and 2 weeks since Althea left. Grayson was in Berlin for a conference when his phone rang. The school nurse, her voice tight with professional calm that immediately triggered panic. Mr. Hale, Leo collapsed during gym class. He's conscious, but we've called an ambulance. You need to come home. The flight back was 7 hours. 7 hours of Grayson's mind spinning worst-case scenarios. Heart condition, brain tumor. Something genetic Elena had passed down that doctors missed. He landed and went straight to the hospital. Found Leo in a bed that swallowed him whole, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily, and 4 in his small arm. The boy looked at him, not with relief, not with fear, just acknowledgement. Like Grayson was just another person in the room. No more, no less. What happened? Grayson asked the doctor outside. We're running tests. His white blood cell count is abnormal. Joint inflammation. Chronic fatigue. It presents like an autoimmune disorder, possibly juvenile arthritis or lupus. We'll know more in a few days. Is it serious? The doctor's expression was carefully neutral. It's manageable with treatment, but autoimmune conditions are unpredictable. He'll need monitoring, lifestyle changes, possibly medication for the rest of his life. The rest of his life. Grayson felt the floor tilt. His son, his quiet, distant, 9-year-old son, had been suffering, maybe for months, and he'd been too busy building empires to notice. Can I see him? The doctor nodded. He's asking for someone named Althea. Does that mean anything to you? Grayson's chest tightened. No, nobody important. The machines beeped in steady rhythm. Inhale, exhale. Proof of life reduced to numbers on a screen. Grayson sat beside Leo's bed for 3 days straight. Didn't shower. Didn't change clothes. Ignored the 17 emails from his COO and the emergency board meeting he was supposed to chair. None of it mattered. Not the stock price. Not the Singapore deal. Not the empire he'd spent a decade building. Just this. Just his son. Just the steady rise and fall of a small chest under a thin hospital blanket. Leo slept most of the time. When he was awake, he stared at the ceiling. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't complain about the needle pricks or the bland food or the constant interruptions from nurses. Does it hurt? Grayson asked once. Not really. Are you scared? Leo thought about it. No. Why not? Because scared means you have something to lose. The words landed like a punch. 9 years old, and already carrying that kind of emptiness. Grayson wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he had everything to lose. His health, his future, his father who loved him even if he'd never learned how to show it. But the words stuck in his throat. Because Leo was right. You can't fear losing what's already gone. The doctors ran tests, drew blood, monitored inflammation markers, adjusted medications, spoke in careful, clinical terms that meant we're not sure, but sounded more confident. Juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Possibly. Treatment would involve immunosuppressants, physical therapy, regular monitoring. No guarantees, but cautiously optimistic. Grayson nodded through it all. Signed consent forms. Wrote checks. Did what he did best. Threw resources at a problem and hoped it would solve itself. But at night, when the hospital hallways went quiet and Leo's breathing evened out, Grayson sat in the uncomfortable chair by the window and felt the weight of every choice he'd made. The staff he'd fired without second thought. The people he'd crushed on his way up. The son he'd raised in a palace, but neglected in every way that counted. And Althea. Always Althea. Her face the night he accused her. Her voice when she said, This isn't it. She'd been right. About everything. On the fourth night, Leo woke up around 2 a.m. Grayson was dozing, head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck aching. "Dad." He jolted awake. "What's wrong? Do you need the nurse?" "No. I just—" Leo's voice was small. "I'm hungry." Relief flooded through Grayson. Hunger was normal. Hunger was good. "I'll call for food." "What do you want?" "Not hospital food." Leo's eyes welled up. "I want real food. I want her soup." "Whose soup?" But Grayson already knew. Could see it in his son's face. The longing for something he'd lost 3 years ago and never stopped missing. "I'll see what I can do," Grayson said quietly. He stepped into the hallway, asked a nurse if there was a cafeteria open this late. She pointed him toward the basement level. But when he got back to the room 10 minutes later with a sad container of chicken noodle soup from a vending machine, Leo's bed was empty. Panic struck, immediate and violent. Grayson spun, checking the bathroom. Empty. Looked into the hallway. No sign of him. "Nurse." He grabbed the first scrubs he saw. "My son, he's gone." "Calm down, sir. He probably just went for a walk. These monitors would alert us if—" But Grayson was already running, checking rooms, calling Leo's name, heart hammering against his ribs. He took the stairs down, burst through the stairwell door into the basement level. Fluorescent lights hummed, the smell of cleaning solution and recycled air. And then he saw it, through the cafeteria window, a scene that stopped him cold. Leo, sitting at a table, smiling, actually smiling, and across from him, holding a paper bowl, speaking softly. Althea Brooks. Time fractured, split into before and after. Before Grayson saw her, after he realized what it meant. She looked different, thinner, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Scrubs that marked her as hospital staff, cafeteria worker, maybe, or janitorial. The kind of job nobody notices. The kind of job people like him made invisible. But to Leo, she was everything. The boy held a spoon, lifting soup to his mouth while she watched with that same patient smile Grayson remembered from 3 years ago. She said something. Leo laughed, actually laughed, and nearly choked on his food. She handed him a napkin, ruffled his hair, checked his 4-line with practiced care, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Like she belonged there. Grayson stood frozen behind the glass. Part of him wanted to burst in, to pull Leo away, to demand explanations, to build walls between his son and this woman he'd exiled. But he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch as his son, his sick, lonely, hollow-eyed son, became a child again. "You got so tall," Althea was saying. Her voice carried through the quiet cafeteria. "What are they feeding you?" "Nothing good." Leo's smile faltered. "I don't eat much anymore." "I can tell. You're all bones." She tilted her head. "But this soup will help. My grandmother's recipe. Secret ingredient is love. Don't tell the health department." Leo giggled. Actually giggled. The sound stabbed through Grayson's chest. "I missed you," the boy whispered. Althea's expression cracked. Just for a second. But she recovered, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Every single day. Why didn't you come back?" "I couldn't. Your father, he made a choice. And I had to respect it. But it wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't." She wiped her eyes quickly. "But life isn't always fair. Sometimes good people get hurt. Sometimes the truth takes time to win. But that doesn't mean we stop being kind. Doesn't mean we stop showing up. Is that why you're here? In the hospital?" She nodded. "I work nights. Cafeteria and cleaning. It's honest work. Pays the bills." And sometimes her voice softened. "Sometimes I get to meet brave kids who need soup at 2 in the morning." Leo stared at her. "Did you know I was here?" "Not until tonight. I was restocking the vending machines on your floor. Saw your name on the board." She touched his cheek. "Autoimmune disorder. That's a big word for a big fight. But you're strong. Stronger than you know." I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling brave. It's about getting up even when you're scared. Even when everything hurts. Even when the people who should protect you don't. She paused. Looked away. You keep fighting, Leo. For yourself. Not for anyone else. Will you visit me again? Althea hesitated. Grayson saw the war behind her eyes. The longing. The fear. The knowledge that getting close meant risking pain all over again. I shouldn't, she finally said. Your father. I don't care what he thinks. Leo's voice turned sharp. Bitter. He doesn't care about me anyway. That's not true. Yes, it is. He only showed up because the school called. He's been here 3 days and barely talks to me. Just sits there staring at his phone like I'm another meeting he has to get through. Each word was a knife, and Grayson felt every single one. People show love differently, Althea said gently. Sometimes they're so scared of losing you, they forget how to hold you. That's a dumb excuse. Maybe. But hurt people, Leo. Your dad is carrying grief he never learned to process. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it your fault. But it makes it understandable. You're nicer than he deserves. She smiled sadly. Maybe. Or maybe I just know what it's like to be judged for one moment instead of seen for everything you are. Leo finished the soup. Set down the spoon. Thank you. Anytime, baby. I mean for everything. For not forgetting me. Althea's eyes filled. I could never forget you. You were the light in a very dark time. Still are. They sat in silence for a moment. Comfortable. Complete. And outside the window, Grayson Hale felt his entire world rearrange itself. Because he'd been wrong. Catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. The bracelet they'd found 5 months after firing her. The evidence he'd buried. The apology he'd never made. It all crashed over him with sickening clarity. He destroyed her life over his own paranoia. His own inability to admit fault. His own desperate need to control things that couldn't be controlled. And she'd survived. Landed here. In a night shift cafeteria job. Feeding his son soup. And offering grace he absolutely didn't deserve. The door to the cafeteria opened. A nurse poked her head in. Leo Hale? Your father is looking for you. We need to get you back to your room. Leo's face fell. Already. Althea stood, helping him up carefully. Doctor's orders. But you know where to find me now. Promise you won't disappear? She hesitated. Then nodded. I promise. But Leo, don't tell your father you saw me. It'll only cause problems. I don't care. I do. She kissed his forehead. Some fights aren't yours to fight. Not yet. Now go. Before they send security. Leo hugged her waist. Held on like she might evaporate. Then, reluctantly pulled away and shuffled toward the nurse. Althea watched him go. Shoulders sagging. Exhaustion written in every line of her body. And when the cafeteria was empty again, she sat back down. Dropped her face into her hands. And let herself cry. Outside, Grayson finally moved. Stumbled backward. Found the nearest wall and leaned against it, legs shaking. He'd spent 3 years building an empire. 3 years telling himself he'd done the right thing. 3 years ignoring the truth. But the truth doesn't disappear just because you lock it away. It waits. Grows. Finds you when you're least prepared. And now here it was. Staring him in the face. Undeniable. Unavoidable. He'd ruined her. And she'd still shown his son more kindness in 20 minutes than Grayson had managed in 3 years. Comment: justice always finds its way. If you believe truth never stays buried. Grayson couldn't feel his legs. He stood there against the cold hospital wall, watching through the cafeteria window as Althea gathered the empty soup bowl and wiped down the table. Simple movements. Practiced. The kind of work that makes you invisible to people who matter. But she wasn't invisible. Not to Leo. Not anymore. And not to him. His mind replayed the last 20 minutes on a loop. His son's laughter. The easy affection between them. The way Leo looked at her like she was safety incarnate. Like she was the parent Grayson should have been, but never managed to become. 3 years. 3 years, he told himself, he'd made the right call. That evidence didn't lie. That protecting his household justified the collateral damage of one woman's reputation. But standing here now, watching her work a night shift in a hospital cafeteria, scrubs worn thin at the elbows, exhaustion carved into her posture, the lies he'd told himself dissolved like sugar in water. She'd been innocent. Completely, obviously innocent. And he'd destroyed her anyway. The bracelet. He remembered the moment the housekeeper brought it to him, found wedged behind furniture where it had fallen months earlier. Remembered staring at it. Remembered the sickening realization that he'd condemned an innocent woman. And what had he done? Locked it away. Told no one. Let her suffer in silence, because admitting fault would mean admitting he was capable of monstrosity. Cowardice dressed up as pragmatism. His phone buzzed. The CFO asking about the quarterly projections. Grayson stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Numbers that used to matter. Meetings that used to feel urgent. All of it suddenly small and meaningless. Because his son had been sick, possibly for months. And instead of noticing, Grayson had been in Berlin, Tokyo, Singapore. Anywhere but home. Anywhere he didn't have to face what he'd become. And when Leo collapsed, when the universe forced Grayson to stop running, the person who showed up wasn't family. Wasn't one of the nannies, paid 6 figures. Wasn't any of the people on his payroll, whose job it was to care. It was her, the woman he'd exiled. Working overnight shifts to survive. And still finding space in her heart to comfort the son of the man who'd ruined her. What kind of person does that? What kind of strength does that require? Grayson had built skyscrapers, negotiated billion-dollar deals, been called a genius by people who measure success in stock prices and market share. But he didn't have one fraction of the strength this woman carried in her tired shoulders. Shame hit him then. Real shame. Not the performative kind that shows up in press releases or damage control meetings, but the soul-deep recognition that he'd been weighed and found wanting. He'd had power and used it to crush someone powerless. Had evidence and ignored it when it proved him wrong. Had a son who needed him and chose spreadsheets instead. And Althea Brooks, who had every right to hate him, to spit in his face, to tell Leo the truth about what his father really was, chose Grace instead. Some fights aren't yours to fight, she told Leo. Protecting Grayson even now, even after everything. He didn't deserve it. Didn't deserve her silence or her mercy or the fact that she was still kind to his son despite what his father had done. But maybe that was the point. Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what someone else chooses to give. Inside the cafeteria, Althea turned off the lights, gathered her cleaning cart, prepared to move to the next floor, the next mess, the next invisible task that kept the world running, while people like Grayson took credit. And Grayson finally understood what Elena had tried to tell him before she died. You're building the wrong things, Gray. Empires crumble. But people are forever. He thought she was being sentimental, naive. Turns out she was just right. Grayson moved before his brain could stop him. Pushed through the cafeteria door. His shoes squeaked on the freshly mopped floor. Althea. She froze. Back to him. Shoulders tensing. The cleaning cart handle gripped tight enough to turn her knuckles pale. Slowly, she turned around. Their eyes met for the first time in 3 years. And Grayson saw it all. The recognition, the fear, the exhaustion. But underneath, something harder. Something that looked like survival. Mr. Hale. Her voice was carefully neutral. Professional. Like they were strangers discussing the weather. Is there something you need? The formality cut deeper than anger would have. She'd created distance. Built walls. And who could blame her? What are you doing here? The question came out wrong. accusatory instead of curious. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. I work here. Night shift. Cafeteria service and sanitation. Has been for about 2 years now. 2 years. In the same city. In the same hospital where his son now lay sick. The universe's sense of irony was brutal. I saw you. With Leo. Her expression flickered. Genuine fear this time. I didn't approach him. He wandered down here alone. I was just feeding him. Taking care of him. Grayson's voice cracked. Better than I have in 3 years. Althea studied him, trying to figure out if this was a trap. If he was about to accuse her of something else. Trying to gauge how much danger she was in. He was hungry. I had soup. That's all it was. No, it wasn't. Grayson stepped closer. She stepped back. The movement was instinctive, protective, and it destroyed him. After everything I did to you, why would you help him? Help us. He's 9 years old and sick. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. What kind of person would I be if I walked past that? Most people would. After what he couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that would make it real. But Althea said them for him. After you accused me of theft? Fired me without proof? Made sure I couldn't get hired anywhere decent for the next year. Her calm fractured. Just barely. After you believed I was guilty because it was easier than admitting you might be wrong. Yes. The word came out broken. I thought about it. She set down the cleaning spray. Crossed her arms. Thought about walking right past his room. Thought about letting someone else handle it. Thought about all the ways I could ignore your son the way you ignored the truth. Why didn't you? Because he's innocent. She said it simply. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He didn't fire me. He didn't make assumptions. He just lost someone he cared about because his father chose pride over proof. And now he's sick and scared and... Her voice wavered. He doesn't deserve to pay for your mistakes. The silence that followed was suffocating. Grayson wanted to defend himself. Wanted to explain that he'd been grieving, that he'd been scared, that the evidence seemed so clear. But every excuse died in his throat. Because none of it mattered. None of it justified what he'd done. I found the bracelet. The confession ripped out of him. 5 months after I fired you. Behind the dresser. Right where it fell. Althea went very still. You found it. Yes. 5 months after. Yes. And you never. She laughed. But it wasn't humor. It was something jagged and painful. You never thought to call. To apologize. To clear my name. I didn't know how. You didn't want to know how. The anger finally surfaced. Raw and clean. Because that would mean admitting you were wrong. That you'd ruined someone's life over your own inability to trust. Your own need to always be right. You're correct. I lost everything, Mr. Hale. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice stayed strong. My job. My apartment. My kids lived in a shelter for 4 months because nobody would hire me after that reference you gave. My daughter's medication got rationed because I couldn't afford it. My son asked me if I was a bad person because kids at school heard rumors. Do you understand what that does to someone? Grayson's vision blurred. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 3 years. Sorry doesn't undo the nights I cried myself to sleep. Sorry doesn't erase the way my children looked at me when I told them we had to leave our home. I know. Then why are you here? She wiped her face roughly. What do you want from me? Absolution? Permission to feel less guilty? Because I don't have that to give you. I don't want anything. I needed you to know, that I see what I did. That watching you care for my son when you had every right to hate him. Hate me. It showed me exactly who you are. And exactly who I am. Althea stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her cleaning cart. Your son is in room 412. He needs consistent medication, gentle exercise, and someone who actually sees him. Not the empire. Not the meetings. Him. She turned toward the door. Can you do that, Mr. Hale? Or is your pride still more important than your child? She didn't wait for an answer. Just walked out. Left him standing alone in the empty cafeteria under fluorescent lights that hummed like accusations. And for the first time in his life, Grayson Hale had no response. No defense. No way to spin the narrative in his favor. Just the truth. Cold and unforgiving. He'd been wrong. And wrong didn't care about his net worth. Hit subscribe if you believe forgiveness is stronger than hate. Only bitter hearts won't. The call came exactly 1 week later. Grayson was in Leo's hospital room, reading aloud from a book about dragons and unlikely heroes. His son was half asleep, medication making him drowsy, but he'd smiled when Grayson started reading. Actually smiled. Small victories. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He almost declined, but something made him answer. Mr. Hale? This is Denise from Prestige Estate Management. We completed the renovation work on your master suite and found some items that had fallen behind the built-ins during the previous remodel. Grayson's blood went cold. What items? Jewelry mostly. A diamond tennis bracelet, some loose earrings, and papers shuffled. Oh, and another bracelet. Sapphire and diamond. The crew supervisor thought it looked expensive, so we secured everything in our safe. Would you like us to deliver it, or should we? The phone slipped from his hand, clattered against the tile floor. Leo stirred. Dad. I'm fine. Go back to sleep. But Grayson's voice was hollow. He picked up the phone with shaking fingers. When did you find this? Yesterday afternoon, during the final inspection. Why? Is something wrong? No. I'll send someone to collect them. He ended the call, stared at the wall, felt reality crack and reform around him. The bracelet. His wife's bracelet. The one that had started everything. It had been there all along. Not stolen. Just lost. Fallen behind furniture during some forgotten moment. Hidden by renovation work done months before he'd even hired Althea. She'd been innocent from the beginning. Not just innocent. She'd never had the opportunity to be guilty. The timeline didn't even match up. The bracelet had been inaccessible long before she ever set foot in that room. He'd destroyed her over something that was literally impossible. The walls started closing in. Grayson stood abruptly, startling Leo awake again. I need air. I'll be right back. He stumbled into the hallway, found the nearest bathroom, locked himself in a stall, and vomited until there was nothing left. 3 years. 3 years of telling himself the evidence was solid. 3 years of ignoring doubt. 3 years of letting an innocent woman suffer because he couldn't face the possibility that he'd been wrong. And now there was proof. Undeniable physical proof. The kind that would hold up in any court. The kind that exposed him not just as wrong, but as reckless, cruel, unjust. He'd played judge, jury, and executioner, and gotten it catastrophically wrong. His phone buzzed again. His lawyer probably, or his assistant with some crisis that felt urgent until you realized what actually mattered. But Grayson couldn't answer, couldn't function, could barely breathe. Because the worst part wasn't that he'd been wrong. The worst part was that he'd known, somewhere deep down where truth lives before pride buries it. He'd known there was doubt. Known the evidence was circumstantial. Known he was making assumptions based on fear and grief and the desperate need to control something in a life spinning out of control. And he'd done it anyway. Chosen certainty over compassion. Chosen his reputation over someone else's livelihood. Chosen wrong. He pulled himself together eventually. Splashed water on his face. Straightened his tie. Put on the mask he wore so well. But when he looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize the man staring back. Success. Power. Influence. All of it bought at the cost of his humanity. And standing in a hospital bathroom, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and recycled air, Grayson Hale finally understood what he'd become. A man with everything and nothing at all. 3 days later, Grayson returned to the hospital carrying flowers. Not roses, not orchids, not the expensive arrangements he usually sent to impress clients and close deals. Daisies. Simple, humble daisies in a mason jar. The kind Althea used to put on his kitchen table before he drove her away. He'd asked at the front desk when her shift started. Waited in the basement hallway for 2 hours until he saw her push through the service entrance, already tired before the night even began. Althea. She stopped, saw him, and her expression closed off immediately. Mr. Hale, if this is about Leo, the nurses can... It's not about Leo. It's about you. He held out the flowers. Please. Just 5 minutes. She stared at the daisies. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. Memory. But she didn't take them. I'm working. I don't have time for... The renovation company called. They found the bracelet behind the built-in cabinets. It was there the whole time. You never could have taken it because it fell there months before you were even hired. The words tumbled out. You were innocent. Completely innocent. And I ruined your life anyway. Althea went very still. I already knew that. I know you did. But I didn't. Or I didn't want to. I needed someone to blame. Someone to punish. Because if I admitted the bracelet was just lost, then I'd have to admit I couldn't control everything. That bad things happened for no reason. That my wife died for no reason. That I was... His voice cracked. That I was drowning and taking everyone down with me. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to hear it. Because I can't undo what I did. But I can at least name it. Call it what it was. He set the flowers on a nearby cart since she wouldn't take them. I wronged you. Deeply. Deliberately. And then I hid the evidence that proved your innocence because my ego was more important than your life. You think I don't know that? Her voice was sharp now. You think I haven't spent 3 years knowing I was innocent while everyone else believed I was a thief? No. I know you know. But I needed to say it. Out loud. Where it's real. Althea crossed her arms. What do you want, Mr. Hale? You want me to forgive you so you can sleep better? Want me to tell you it's okay, that people make mistakes, that we can all just move on? No. I don't want your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a formal letter clearing your name. Full accountability for my false accusation. References that will open any door you want. And compensation. It won't give you back 3 years, but it might. Keep your money. Althea. I don't want your guilt money, Mr. Hale. I don't want anything from you except for you to be a better father to that boy upstairs. She stepped closer, eyes blazing. He is good. He is kind. He deserves better than a man who destroys people and then throws cash at them like that fixes it. You're right. I know I'm right. Her voice softened slightly. But here's what you don't understand. Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's not a transaction. It's not deserved or purchased or negotiated. Then what is it? It's a choice. She picked up the daisies. Looked at them. It's choosing not to carry hate because hate is heavy and I'm already tired. It's choosing to believe people can change even when they've given you every reason not to. It's choosing freedom over bitterness. Tears streamed down Grayson's face. I don't know how to change. Start by showing up. For him. Not as the billionaire. Not as the CEO. As his dad. She handed him back the envelope. And start by making this right. Not with money. With action. Clear my name publicly. Write recommendations. Tell the truth even when it makes you look bad. I will. I promise. Promises are cheap, Mr. Hale. Prove it. She turned to leave, then paused. And for what it's worth? That boy loves you. Even after everything. Even when you don't deserve it. Don't waste that. People don't get unlimited chances to do right by the ones who matter. She walked away, left him standing there with daisies and an envelope and the weight of his own failures. But for the first time in 3 years, Grayson felt something other than emptiness. Hope. Terrifying and fragile, but real. The harsh sound of the cafeteria door closing was the judge's gavel, and Grayson Hale had just been sentenced to a life of truth. He stood there, holding a handful of wilting daisies and an empty envelope, the cold realization settling over him. He had failed. Not as a CEO, but as a man. He didn't return to his son immediately. He sat on a cold, unforgiving bench in the deserted hallway, staring at the flowers. Althea's final words about duty and love echoed in the silence. Leo needed someone who truly saw him, and Althea, the woman he'd forced into invisibility, was the only one capable. An hour later, when he finally walked back into Leo's room, a different energy met him. 2 doctors and a nurse stood by the bed, their expressions not grim, but cautiously optimistic. Leo was awake, calmer, and the monitors showed stability. The chief physician looked at Grayson. "Mr. Hale, we have good news. We don't understand it completely, but Leo's markers have stabilized dramatically in the last 24 hours. His inflammation is down, and he's resting comfortably. The body's response to the new medication has been, frankly, miraculous." Grayson could only stare at his son. Leo was gazing at the vase of daisies sitting on his bedside table. He reached out a small hand, weak but steady, and touched a yellow petal. "They're for Miss Brooks," Leo whispered to the nurse, a faint smile touching his lips. "She likes the simple ones." Althea hadn't needed to stay. She hadn't needed to ask about the diagnosis. She had simply shown up, given comfort, and left behind a piece of herself, a quiet, gentle strength that seemed to anchor the chaos. As the medical team filed out, full of clinical optimism, Grayson approached the bed. Althea had done more than just stabilize Leo's vitals. She'd healed a part of the boy's heart that Grayson had shattered. He looked at Leo's peaceful face, then down at the fragile daisies. He saw his billion-dollar empire crumbling under the weight of one simple, undeniable truth. His wealth was powerless here. His control was an illusion. All his money couldn't buy a single hour of the comfort Althea offered. It couldn't fix the sickness in his soul. He knelt by the bed, tears finally flowing without shame. "Maybe this is what healing looks like," he whispered, mostly to himself. "Not a cure, but someone showing you how to feel safe again." Think about that. The most powerful man in the city, realizing that the only thing that could save his son, and himself, was the mercy of the woman he'd crushed. Can you even fathom the size of that regret? It was a strange, terrifying miracle. Leo's physical recovery seemed tied, impossibly, to Althea's emotional intervention. He had to earn her presence back, not with promises, but with fundamental, life-altering change. It was time for Grayson Hale to rebuild his entire life on the foundation of humility, a foundation he'd spent 40 years avoiding. This was the only way he could ever hope to see Leo, or Althea, smile again. The clock had run out on excuses. The miracle of Leo's stabilization, that sudden inexplicable shift toward health, didn't offer Grayson Hale relief. It offered obligation, a debt he could never repay with cash. He spent the next 3 weeks doing the hardest work of his life, being present. He canceled entire continents of business, leaving his COO in a state of bewildered panic. He learned the names of Leo's nurses, the side effects of Leo's new medication, and how to fold a blanket without making his son flinch. But the most critical repair work wasn't in the hospital room. It was in the unforgiving court of public opinion. He'd told Althea he would prove himself with action, and this required a gesture so grand, so irreversible, that it would serve as eternal public penance. 2 weeks after Leo left the hospital, a special press conference was called at the Hale Tech headquarters, 1 floor below Grayson's mahogany-paneled office. The world expected a merger or a breakthrough AI announcement. Instead, Grayson stepped up to the podium, looking visibly older, his suit less crisp, his eyes ringed with genuine exhaustion. 3 years ago, he began, his voice rough but amplified across every major financial network. I ruined a woman's life over a misplaced object. My pride, my grief, and my profound arrogance led me to believe I was above the truth. I was wrong. I committed an act of gross injustice against a truly good person, Althea Brooks. He laid out the entire story. The misplaced bracelet, the hidden evidence, the cold calculation of his silence, and the resulting suffering Althea endured while living in shelters with her children. It wasn't an apology. It was a public execution of his own ego. The financial world watched in horrified silence as the billionaire dismantled his own myth of infallibility. Then came the announcement. To prevent this kind of injustice from happening to any other family, I am launching a foundation with an initial endowment of $500 million. It will provide comprehensive legal support, emergency housing, and vocational training for caregivers and single parents who face wrongful termination or unfair treatment in domestic service. The name of the foundation flashed across the screens. The Brooks Initiative. Think about that. The man who destroyed her, forced to name his most powerful creation after her. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a monumental public acknowledgement that her truth was bigger than his empire. He knew the compensation money would be refused. The apology, though heard by the world, was still an empty gesture to Althea. He needed her partnership to make the initiative real. He found her exactly where he expected, working the early dinner shift at the hospital, now with a new, quiet determination. She wore a simple white blouse, no longer scrubs. I need to talk to you about the initiative, Grayson said, standing awkwardly by her table in the empty cafeteria. I saw the press conference, Althea replied, her expression carefully blank. It was fair. I appreciate you clearing my name publicly. It's not about clearing your name. It's about rebuilding this system I exploited, he said. He slid a detailed organizational chart across the table. I need a director. Someone with the moral clarity to ensure this money is used for justice, not PR. I need you. She leaned back, a genuine, tired laugh escaping her. You want me to work for you? Again? You think a fancy title fixes 3 years of trauma. I don't want you working for me, Grayson corrected, leaning forward, his voice low and earnest. I want you working with me. You are the only person who truly knows the difference between charity and justice. You set the mission, the strategy, the budget. I will be on the board, but you run it. As a partner, as an equal. He waited, letting the humility of the request hang heavy in the air. This was the true test. Not how much he could give, but how much control he was willing to surrender. He wasn't offering a job. He was offering restitution and a chance to truly change things. Althea picked up the chart. She saw the vast potential, the chance to turn her own devastating experience into a shield for others. She looked at the man across the table, no longer the tyrant, but a supplicant seeking guidance. For the first time since that terrible day, partnership replaced hierarchy. The long, impossible road to rebuilding trust had finally begun. Subscribe if you believe money means nothing without compassion. The greedy never will. The Hale estate had been built for silence. Its marble floors were designed to absorb sound. Its 12-foot ceilings to hold only the cold echo of power. But 6 months after the Brooks Initiative was founded, the mansion was hosting its inaugural fundraising gala, and it was filled with something Grayson Hale had never paid for: noise. It was the noise of life, the squeak of children's shoes on the polished floors, the robust laughter of volunteers who knew struggle firsthand, the joyous, unrestrained cries of families who had been given a new start, all thanks to Althea's unflinching vision. The mansion, once a museum dedicated to a dead marriage and a distant fortune, had finally been converted into a home for hope. Grayson stood near the doorway of the grand ballroom, his posture still straight, but the tightness around his eyes eased. He was dressed in a dark suit, yet felt more comfortable than he had when he'd worn it to accept awards. Tonight, he was merely a footnote, a bank account in service of a greater cause. He watched Althea. She was everywhere at once, hugging a woman whose housing had been secured by the initiative, calming a frightened toddler, speaking confidently to a city council member about policy reform. She wasn't just directing. She was embodying the mission. Her face, once etched with exhaustion from night shifts and fear, now radiated purpose. Then he saw his son. Leo, nearly 10 now, looked nothing like the skeletal child in the hospital bed. He was running, truly running, across the foyer, chasing another boy. His face was flushed with exertion, his movements fluid, his laughter a bright, clear bell that cut through the surrounding chatter. Leo stopped suddenly, catching his breath. He saw his father, didn't hesitate, and ran over. "Dad, did you see me? I beat James by a mile. Ms. Brooks says I can have one more cookie, but only if I finish my juice." "I saw you," Grayson said, his throat tight. He knelt down, meeting his son's gaze, and simply pulled him close. It wasn't the distant, formal hug of old. It was raw, honest contact. "You run faster than anyone in this house." Leo hugged back, completely at ease, before sprinting off to claim his prize. Think about that visual. A boy, once too frail to stand, now running free in the house that almost broke him. How much time did Grayson waste chasing money, when all his son needed was permission to smile? Grayson watched him go, a quiet pride settling in his chest. It wasn't pride in his company's valuation or the success of the event. It was pride in the fact that he was finally, tangibly useful. He hadn't bought this life. He had earned it, piece by piece, through self-correction and surrender. He was watching his repentance take physical form, in the shape of a house full of happy, safe people. And he finally understood. The wealth was the means, but Althea, her integrity, her compassion, was the true engine of their collective healing. The party was winding down. The last of the grant recipients had departed, and only the inner circle of the initiative remained, murmuring quietly while waiters cleared the empty champagne flutes. Grayson moved toward the grand staircase. He walked past the exact spot where Leo had screamed his heartbreak 3 years prior, past the point where Althea had stood, legs shaking, before walking out into the rain. The architecture hadn't changed, but the memory was now draped in the fabric of healing. Althea was standing there, near the bottom step, looking up at the spot where she had confronted him in his office. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, looking every bit the director, yet carrying the quiet authority of a survivor. Grayson stopped beside her, his movements slow and deliberate. "It's loud tonight," he observed, his voice soft. "It is," Althea agreed, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I like it better this way." This house needed the noise. They stood in a silence that was no longer suffocating, but comfortable, the kind of silence shared by two people who had survived a war together. "I used to think success was owning everything," Grayson confessed, staring up at the shadow of his office door. "The properties, the companies, the attention. I thought the number on the Forbes list was my measure. And now," he sighed, running a hand over the smooth wood of the banister. "Now I realize every single thing I achieved, all the billions, was just a distraction. It was a refusal to face the truth of my own fear. I was building walls because I couldn't bear to be wrong." Althea turned toward him, her expression gentle, devoid of any lingering bitterness. "Real success isn't owning things, Mr. Hale. Real success is learning when to let go. Learning to release the need to be right. To release the belief that you can control pain. To let go of the shame and choose to build something new instead." That line. It was the wisdom of the powerless offered to the powerful. The emotional contrast was perfect. Althea didn't need his wealth to define her. She used her suffering to define her purpose. He nodded, absorbing her statement. You taught Leo that it's okay to feel sad. You taught me it's okay to feel shame. And I thank you. We both paid a price for this initiative, Althea reminded him, her tone firm. Mine was public disgrace. Yours was humility. We're even now, and we have work to do. It was the perfect closure. No romantic entanglement to muddy the waters. No dramatic profession of eternal friendship. Just two partners forged in fire and injustice, agreeing on the next step forward. The Brooks Initiative has its first board meeting next week, Grayson stated, moving back into CEO mode, but now with a human core. I know, Althea said, her eyes shining with quiet anticipation. I set the agenda. Grayson gave her a faint, genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes. Good. And with that single quiet exchange, the story shifted. The accusation was gone. The exile was over. All that remained was the future, built on the one thing stronger than pride: unconditional honesty. Subscribe if you believe money means nothing without compassion. The greedy never will. The sapphire and diamond bracelet, the single object that had once wielded the power to ruin lives, had sat locked in Grayson Hale's safe for nearly 4 years. It was cold, beautiful, and utterly cursed. It was the physical embodiment of his worst decision, a mistake measured in carats and human suffering. But now it was time for that symbol to be redefined. Grayson commissioned a simple box, crafted from aged walnut. It had no silver inlay, no gold trim, just plain, honest wood. He brought the box into Leo's room one quiet afternoon, finding his son building an impossibly complex structure with plastic bricks. "Hey, bud," Grayson said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Leo looked up, his movements unhurried. The old fear of his father's sudden presence was gone, replaced by a calm acceptance. Grayson opened the safe, retrieved the bracelet, and placed it inside the box. The diamonds flashed only briefly before the lid was closed, dimming the extravagant light. "What is that?" Leo asked, dropping his bricks. "This is a treasure box," Grayson explained, handing the small, heavy object to Leo. "It holds something very valuable. The most expensive thing I own, really." Leo turned it over, examining the plain wood. "It doesn't look expensive." "The real value isn't on the outside," Grayson countered. "It's what's inside and what it represents. This box holds the bracelet that started everything." Leo went still, his fingers tracing the name lessons that Grayson had burned into the wood. The boy remembered the pain, the screams, the terrifying sense of loss. "Why is it a treasure?" Leo asked, his voice small. "It made Ms. Brooks go away." "It did?" Grayson agreed, his own voice steady. "But it taught me a lesson that all my billions couldn't buy. It taught me that money is just paper, and power is just an illusion. That arrogance can be more destructive than any storm." Grayson took the box back and gently placed it on a high shelf in Leo's closet, next to old report cards and dried flowers. "Some treasures aren't meant to be worn," he told Leo, meeting his son's searching gaze. "They're meant to remind us who we used to be, so we can be better today." Think about that symbolism. The man who once ruled the financial world was now preserving his shame, not in a vault, but in his son's closet. How many people in power ever choose a painful truth over a comfortable lie? He was no longer the reflection of a cold-eyed mogul, but of a man who looked worn down by humility, yet anchored by an earned sense of peace. He was no longer defined by his wealth, but by the excruciating effort it took to grow beyond his failure. The box remained sealed, a silent guardian of the most profound lesson the billionaire had ever learned. Life, it turned out, didn't reward redemption with immediate peace. It rewarded it with work. Hard, steady, beautiful work. Leo's health continued to improve, mirroring the growing warmth in the mansion. The Brooks Initiative had expanded across 3 states, becoming a powerhouse of genuine, compassionate legal advocacy under Althea's tireless direction. And in the garden, a final, essential structure was rising. Leo and Althea were building a treehouse in the largest oak on the estate. This wasn't a professional construction job. This was hammered nails, rough-sawn lumber, and the smell of fresh wood shavings, a project built with shared effort and boundless patience. Althea, adept and practical, was teaching Leo how to measure twice and cut once. She didn't treat him like a patient or a delicate child. She treated him like a responsible apprentice. Leo was laughing again, genuinely loudly, his face smudged with dirt and triumph when a board finally landed straight. Grayson watched from the wide, stone porch. He wasn't helping, not because he was too busy, but because he was finally smart enough to know when to stay out of the way. He realized that the greatest gift he could give them was the freedom of their relationship, untainted by his need to control or contribute financially. He sat in the afternoon sun, a cup of coffee cooling forgotten in his hand. He wasn't reading quarterly reports. He was just watching. He was observing the intricate dance of trust, communication, and mutual respect that he had spent his entire life failing to master. The house was no longer a beautiful prison. It was a backdrop for real life. Did Grayson truly deserve this peace? Did the debt he owed Althea ever truly get paid? The truth is, it didn't matter. Forgiveness isn't transactional. It's a gift that allows the recipient a chance to earn it every single day going forward. Althea looked down from the partially built platform, catching Grayson's gaze. She gave him a short, professional nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose. There was no romance in the gesture, no lingering affection, only the profound, unshakable respect of partners who had seen the absolute worst in each other and chosen to work toward the best. Their bond was forged not in attraction, but in redemption. The world still called Grayson Hale a billionaire. He still owned Hale Tech and still held immense influence. But the man sitting on the porch, watching his son climb higher and higher toward the sky, felt none of a hunger that had once defined him. He was peaceful for the first time in his life. He wasn't focused on the stock market. He was focused on the structural integrity of a small wooden fort. He was no longer the man who built tomorrow. He was just a father, grateful for a second chance. He was a man who had finally learned to value the simple, noisy, messy joy of a life built on honesty. He fired her for something she didn't do. But when she fed his son, she fed his soul too. And that day, the richest man alive learned what poverty really meant. If Grayson's story taught you anything, hit that subscribe button now and share this video to remind others that redemption is always possible. Lastly, download your free ebook titled How to Heal from Betrayal Without Becoming Bitter by clicking the link in the description and pinned comment.